Public Relations. Edward L. Bernays. 1945. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 1. The Growth of Public Relations. 12. The Ideal Public Relations Man. The ideal public relations man does not exist in the flesh. One person cannot, for the simple reason that he is a human being conditioned by experience and environment, possess all the characteristics of the ideal. Nevertheless, if we can describe the ideal public relations man, if we can point out the qualities that make the successful public relations practitioner, we will have set up standards and criteria by which those desiring to enter the field can judge themselves and decide upon their goals. I think that the ideal public relations man should, first of all, be a man of character and integrity, who has acquired a sense of judgment and logic without having lost the ability to think creatively and imaginatively. He should be truthful and discreet, he should be objective, yet possessed of a deep interest in the solution of problems. From his broad cultural background, he should have developed considerably intellectual curiosity, and he should have effective powers of analysis and synthesis along with a rare quality of intuition. And with all these characteristics, he should be trained in the social sciences and in the mechanics of public relations. Anyone who aspires to a career in the field of public relations should examine himself objectively to find out whether he has a reasonable number of these characteristics. If you are not objective about yourself, you will find it hard to be objective about others. It is a helpful exercise to recognize your lack of objectivity in discussing subjects in which you are interested. You will find that you identify yourself with the situation and with some preconceived point of view toward it. Finding out about yourself objectively is an important prerequisite to understanding and dealing with other people's attitudes and motives. This does not mean that you may not find biases and prejudices. Who is not biased? But to function effectively in public relations, you will have to take prejudices into consideration objectively before you advise your client in his relations with other people. This is the personal equation that scientists take into consideration in their investigations. If I am called upon to deal with something about which I have certain preconceived attitudes, I try to divest myself of personal feelings in considering the problem. I try to judge the situation by the criteria of my ethics, the folkways of the groups concerned, the objectives, and the entire situation as far as I can comprehend it. As I stated at the outset, one person obviously cannot have all the characteristics of the ideal public relations man. He may be outstanding in one area of ability and absolutely negative in other areas. For example, the ability to get along with people is desirable in any job concerned with human relations, but the lack of it can be compensated for by unusual insight, intuition, and powers of analysis and synthesis. A primary requisite for public relations is a deep interest in the field, a real drive to work on problems of human adjustment. The best public relations practitioners I know get their greatest satisfaction out of dealing with complicated situations of human accommodation. As for personality structure and moral qualities, the first requisites are character and integrity. Public relations is a new profession. Neither public opinion nor professional societies govern its conduct. The professional himself must be his own arbiter. If he lacks character and integrity, he will fail to maintain the professional conduct on which he will be judged and on which the profession as a whole is judged. A profession is a vocation, an art applied to a science in which the primary consideration is not pecuniary reward. There are, of course, as in other professions, many exploiters of the public interest who call themselves public relations counsel. They are not really public relations counsel, to my way of thinking. Although society today uses no legal sanctions to prevent anybody's designating himself a counsel on public relations, integrity and character are demanded by the very nature of the profession. In his client's interest, the public relations man needs the strength of character and integrity to say no to a client who insists on a policy that may be injurious to him. A public relations man must tell his client not what he wants to hear, but what is sound, what will accomplish his social objectives. In his own interest, the public relations man must maintain his reputation and that of his profession. The very newness of the field demands an even stricter code of ethics than the older professions. He must reflect his integrity and character equally to the public and to the media of communication that reflect and affect public opinion. Unless he maintains such a code, he is lost from every standpoint. Truthfulness is an indispensable quality both for advancement and for serving the media of communication. The public relations man must avoid the temptation to do anything that might harm the public. The profession would be more highly respected if practitioners gave up clients who asked them to act in a way inconsistent with the public interest. Because public relations offers rich financial rewards, men without real qualifications often call themselves public relations counsel to exploit the public interest for selfish ends. When applicants for public relations openings come to our office, I ask them, what do you like to do? Generally they tell me they like to meet people. That, to be sure, is valuable. Yet, some of the ablest public relations men I know are not good at meeting people. They are shy. They cannot express themselves in public. But this is compensated for by other valuable characteristics, such as insight, grasp, intuition, something that amounts almost to second sight in projecting the present into the future. These gifts outweigh any ability to meet people. A handshaker or frontman can meet people. The fellow who is setting a policy, working on problems in the back room, does not necessarily have to possess these qualities. But there is one trait that every public relations man must have if he is to succeed in his profession. He must have discretion. His relationship to his client is as confidential as that of a lawyer to his client or a doctor to his patient. Every public relations man should also have an active desire to help people. His professional activity will be to aid organizations, movements, and people. He will help them to fit better into the society of which they are a part. He must have the desire to do this, and his desire must be quite apart from any monetary considerations between himself and his client. When a public relations man reaches that point in his career at which he is judged proficient, he will find himself working for causes and people who cannot pay, just as socially minded doctors and lawyers do. What about intellectual attainments? A broad cultural background is imperative. It will enable the public relations man to understand the major trends of the culture in which we live, to know the structure and workings of contemporary society. In addition, the public relations man should have some understanding of the social sciences, of the media of mass communication, and of modern man, thought, and doctrine. The social sciences are important because they study and explain man from different aspects: economics, individual psychology, social psychology, and political economy. You may wonder whether an advertising man needs this knowledge, too. In my opinion, he should have comparable knowledge. The advertising man attempts to influence his public in an area limited by words and visual images that he projects in the communication media he uses. The public relations man, on the other hand, often deals with society as a whole. He deals with a complex constellation of dynamic forces, with group adjustments or individual adjustments within the group. Often he does not use visual or pictorial symbols. He deals with action, even bringing it about when necessary. During World War I, for example, an attempt was made to obtain public acceptance of wristwatches for men. At that time, a man who wore a wristwatch was considered effeminate. To overcome this prejudice, it was necessary to understand why people behave as they do. What could be done to overcome the prejudice? The war itself suggested a solution. The trench warfare of those days obliged soldiers to go over the top at the 0 hour, usually while it was still dark. It was important for each soldier to know the exact time, so that the military operation could be coordinated. Matches could not be struck, since the flame would have revealed the location of our troops. However, wristwatches with luminous radium dials enabled soldiers to go over the top on time without attracting the enemy's attention. Also, as every former GI knows today, a wristwatch leaves the hands free for more important occupations than taking out the old-fashioned pocket watch. Far from being unmanly, a wristwatch is an indispensable instrument in the most manly of occupations, military combat. When these facts became public knowledge, people completely reversed their attitude, and today wristwatches are thoroughly accepted by the male sex. The point is this: the more you know about people and their reactions to social symbols, the more effective you can be in public relations. Like Columbus, you can sail west and reach new land by accident. But if you have charts, you can do better. You can arrive at a destination decided upon in advance. There is always a temptation to try to be original in any new field. Because it is a new field, a new man may try to be a pioneer, even if he does not have to be. That builds up one's ego, to be sure. But why not profit from the accumulated literature and experience of public relations? Be original, yes, but not at the price of time and effort wasted by overlooking what other people have already discovered. Actual experience is a major factor in public relations ability. In other professions, which have a background of hundreds or thousands of years, the men in the field have reduced knowledge to certain principles and the practices that logically follow them. Public relations is still so new that each practitioner may prove to be his own best teacher. A good public relations man should, nevertheless, have some knowledge of specific techniques, the skills of the artist, the journalist, and the organizational expert. If he does not know much about them, he must know how to engage persons who can adapt them for his purposes. I may not know print and makeup well. But I know what I want to emphasize in a piece of printed matter and how to select the kind of expert I need to get that effect. One of the first requirements of a good public relations man is that he have a continuing intelligent awareness of life, an intellectual curiosity about all phases of human endeavor. This must be buttressed by a desire to harness curiosity in a practical way. By itself, curiosity serves no useful purpose. The public relations man must have specific knowledge in the fields in which he is functioning, not necessarily the knowledge of the expert, but enough knowledge to differentiate between experts. A good public relations man needs a sense of logic, the ability to think accurately. He must have the gift of taking ideas and situations apart mentally and putting them together. He must be highly objective in his outlook on life, so that he may see ideas and situations both as the stereotypes that they are for the different publics and as they actually are. He cannot take anything for granted. If he lacks objectivity, he is likely to be mesmerized by the way things seem to be. This attitude will handicap him in dealing with new ideas for which he wants to create more or less social acceptance. The ideal public relations man should have the ability to grasp a situation quickly and to project the present into the future, not in the spirit of a fortune teller but in the spirit of a prophet with a keen sense of reality and a knowledge of the social sciences. His analytical powers should be supported by imagination. He must sense what other people think or how they will react to an idea. He should also have the ability to see any situation in a context larger than that of the moment and in broader social terms. If you set out to improve the backyards of America, for example, you must ask yourself sociological questions. What does the backyard mean to the family? Will an improved backyard give the whole family more recreation? Will it induce children to play at home instead of on the street? Will it reduce juvenile delinquency? Is it possible to establish recreational opportunities for adults in improved backyards? These questions can be answered best with the aid of sociology and social psychology. What do we mean by thinking of a situation in wider social terms? Let us take the backyard example again. If you are interested in a movement for improving backyards, you do not start with the simple premise that a backyard is dirty and ought to be clean. You think of it in broader social terms. A renovated backyard, with fresh cut grass, with flowers, a terrace screen, a pergola, and recreational opportunities for young and old, should be conceived in terms of improved family living, improved home sites, and improved play facilities. If you envision the matter further and plan a whole area of renovated backyards, you must begin to think of improved neighborhood and better community relations, of a better looking and more integrated city, of the social effects of such a nationwide movement on the American people as a whole. This quality of imagination must sometimes be accompanied by an ability to dramatize. The public relations man's project may have to be presented in such a way as to arouse public interest and to create high visibility for the idea. An issue may be of the utmost importance to the public, but, like the roots of a tree, it may have little visibility. It is the business of the public relations man to create high visibility for the issues he represents. How is visibility to be attained? That challenge confronts the public relations counsel every day of his professional life. And you may be sure that you cannot achieve high visibility without imagination. Once a group of New York civic leaders sought our aid in removing the head of the Board of Education as a step in overcoming the chaotic public school situation. This was a relatively simple goal that could be achieved with the consent of the public. The real problem was to create high visibility for the facts of education in general and the New York public schools in particular. In an age like ours, when the whole world is in turmoil, public attention is so focused on domestic and foreign politics and war that it is hard to call attention to education. This was a problem that could be solved only by the use of imagination. A committee was organized to educate the public about education. It was called the New York Emergency Committee for Better Schools. The word emergency was the product of imagination. It helped to establish in the mind of the public the existence of a crisis. The term better schools stressed the positive and hopeful side and gave the public something to work for. The committee sent a telegram to Governor Dewey calling the crisis to his attention and appealing for his support in the fight for better schools. Invoking the symbol of authority gave the newspapers a story and focused public interest still further on the school crisis. The public relations man must be able to visualize and utilize indirect methods, to see the possibilities of the unexpected oblique approach. But he should beware of the unusual for its own sake. Every method he employs must rest on a thorough grounding in the social sciences and in past experience. A good public relations man should have a knowledge of the art of persuasion. In persuading the public, he must know how to use facts, his own reason, his persuasive power, and appeals to tradition and emotion. Facts have always had a tremendous impact on the American conscience. We are accustomed to say, "Show me the facts." Let's look at the record. The digging out of facts and their presentation is therefore a very important part of the public relations man's equipment. Unless he knows how to find the facts and how to deal with them, he will be greatly handicapped. The appeal to reason is equally important. Ever since the time of Plato and Aristotle, men have responded to the presentation of the reasons for a thing. The use of reason is basic to man's activity. In a multiple society like ours, made up of many groups, a shortcut to people is through leaders whom they accept. That is why the use of authority is so important in the public relations man's activity. We have long been familiar with advertising testimonials. The appeal to authority is an important matter for the public relations man to handle. We also know the role that tradition plays in our culture. A knowledge of the past is an important tool in the hands of the public relations man. Anthropology and sociology show us how much of the life pattern of human beings everywhere is traditional. The two major forces that dominate human life are inertia and momentum. Tradition is based on inertia. Those persons who argued for isolationism in the late 1930s, for example, cited Washington's farewell address in support of their position. Adherents of the New Deal invoked tradition when they pointed to Jefferson and Jackson. The public relations man should also be fully aware of available knowledge about emotion. The use of emotional appeals is, of course, familiar. It may appear superficially to be a contradiction to stress both scientific knowledge and emotion. But since public relations deals with human beings, every phase of human action and reaction must be taken into account. Part of public relations skill is knowing when to use one method and when another, or in what combination. An important characteristic of any good public relations man is the ability to be convincing. The power of convincing others is important not only in his relations with the public but also in his relations with his clients. All specialists face the problem of convincing. In our democracy, the specialist cannot control the layman, he must convince and persuade him. Every physician, lawyer, architect, and engineer knows what a real art it is to get a client to do something for his own good. This is equally true in public relations. The client may be a specialist in finance or manufacture, his counsel is a specialist in public relations. But everybody fancies himself a specialist in public relations. It requires great tact and great gifts of persuasion to show a client the real facts and inner relationships in a given situation, and convince him of the best policy for him to follow. The public relations man realizes that he is not of much account unless his client follows his advice. A public relations man who cannot sell his client and keep him sold is a poor public relations man. One of the difficult problems in a relationship with a client stems from the fact that the client knows more about the actual conditions and technological side of his business than his public relations counsel, while the counsel presumably knows more about the public than his client. The problem is to adjust these two fields of knowledge to each other. A public relations counsel must have the ability to express himself. He must be able to convey not only his thoughts to his clients but the thoughts of his clients to others. If he cannot write interestingly, he must be able to spot that ability in others and engage their services. Of course, it is better if he can write well himself, but it is not indispensable. Many people believe that a man has to be a writer to succeed in public relations. What is more nearly true is that he has to be a thinker who can communicate his thoughts to others. In appraising a potential public relations man, I do not look for writing ability as qualification number one. I look, rather, for a man who can think creatively and imaginatively, who knows what is going on in the world and in the profession, who has character and integrity and an active desire to help people. He who aspires to a public relations career should love the work. I find that the successful practitioners of public relations, like good runners, get fully as much pleasure from running as from winning the race. An intangible quality that will stand the public relations man in good stead is judgment. Judgment is the ability to evaluate all the factors in a given situation, not only in terms of the present but in terms of the future. It is also the ability to decide on the relative importance of objectives and issues, to learn from experience, and to make the best possible decision in the light of an objective examination of all the facts. So far as the educational training of a public relations man is concerned, I am a great believer in what the civil service laws call college training or its equivalent. Indeed, the equivalent often means more than college training. The fact that a man went to college does not necessarily mean that he has the knowledge or the qualities required in our profession. The equivalent of a college training can be obtained through reading, particularly if intelligently planned. You can also get it from your business and social contacts, the people with whom you associate. You can get it by exposure to the finest radio programs, like Invitation to Learning, to the best books and lectures, to night classes at a college. Part of the great emphasis that our institutions put on college education is because of its status value rather than for its preparation for work in the world, except in the case of activities that require certain specific skills and knowledge. Today, a college education, with its emphasis on status value, is not necessarily indicative of real understanding. Self-education, being more difficult to get, often indicates a greater interest and ability. It shows that the individual wants to overcome his disadvantage. Public relations courses in university curricula are relatively new. 30 years ago there were none. Today a number of colleges and universities offer such courses, some even grant degrees in public relations. Boston University was the first school to give an academic degree in this field. The university started with the social sciences, and from the social sciences they went on to public relations techniques. There is no lack of textbooks that present the mechanics of public relations activity. But these books completely ignore something far more important in public relations: the social, economic, and political problems involved in a client's relations with the public, and the integration of public relations work with the social sciences. At the other extreme are those books on public relations that discuss propaganda in the abstract, and ignore the practical problems involved in communicating ideas to the public. If more people prepared themselves for a career in public relations by a thorough study of the social sciences, as well as of the principles and techniques of the profession itself, it would be a tremendous gain both for the profession and for the United States as a whole. Social, political, and economic changes are taking place so rapidly, and communications have been speeded up so much, that a profession was bound to develop which would act in an advisory and interpretative capacity to business, labor, social service, and other groups. As I have said repeatedly, the activities of the Public Relations Counsel resemble those of an attorney, except that he practices in the court of public opinion instead of a court of law. He advises individuals and groups. He acts as counsel to his client, aids the client to plead his case before the court or public opinion, using the ideal of public interest as a base. He interprets the client to the public and the public to the client. His yardsticks are those of the coincidence of private and public interest. The public relations man helps his client talk to the public. He must know how to supervise and direct the carrying out of plans that will make his client understood. He uses the printed and spoken word and graphic media through which public attention may be reached. The method requires more than a knowledge of media. It needs skill and experience in effective strategy, timing, planning, organization, and methods of integrating all these activities into one whole.